Have you ever stared up at the stars and wondered how it all began or how it might end? Every civilization, from the earliest storytellers huddled around fires to the great empires that shaped history, has grappled with these colossal questions. The answers they crafted weren't just tales, they were mirrors reflecting humanity's deepest fears, wildest hopes, and boundless imagination. These myths of creation and destruction passed down through generations aren't merely stories. They're the echoes of our ancestors trying to make sense of a universe that defies explanation. And what's astonishing isn't just the diversity of these legends, but how they reveal the shared heartbeat of cultures separated by oceans and centuries. Picture this, a world where gods wrestle serpents in the cosmic dark, where Earth rises from the belly of chaos, and where fire, flood, or betrayal can unravel everything in an instant. These aren't just fragments of ancient belief, they're the blueprints of how societies understood their place in the cosmos. Whether it's the Norse myth of Yggdrasil, the world tree holding the 9 realms in its branches, or the Aboriginal Dreamtime where ancestral spirits sculpt the land with song, these stories pulse with life. They tell us what people revered, what they dreaded, and how they made meaning from the unfathomable. Today, we're embarking on a journey through 30 of these legendary myths, each one a window into a culture's soul. We'll witness cosmic battles between deities, divine interventions that birth civilizations, and cataclysms that reset existence itself. Some myths will feel hauntingly familiar, others will defy everything you thought you knew. But together, they'll paint a tapestry of human creativity as vast as the skies these stories once tried to explain. So settle in. Whether you're here for the drama, the wisdom, or the sheer wonder of it all, you're about to discover why these ancient narratives still captivate us and what they reveal about the timeless human spirit. Long before time itself took shape, there was only Ginnungagap, a yawning void where fire and ice clashed in endless silence. Then, from that swirling emptiness, life stirred. The heat of Muspelheim's flames licked at the frozen edges of Niflheim, and where they met, the primordial giant Ymir was born, his body formed from melting frost. But Ymir was not alone. From the sweat of his armpit emerged the first of the Jotnar, the giants, while the cow Ortumbla licked the salty ice blocks, uncovering Beri, the ancestor of the gods. This was the chaotic cradle of the Norse cosmos, a world where creation sprang from violence and chance. Then came Odin and his brothers, Vili and Ve, who saw in Ymir not a guardian but a threat. They slew the giant, and from his corpse they sculpted the 9 realms. His flesh became the earth, his blood the seas, his bones the mountains, and his skull the dome of the sky. Even his eyebrows were repurposed as the walls of Midgard, the realm of humans. But this act of creation was also one of betrayal, sowing the seeds of a cycle that would haunt the gods forever. For the giants, now exiled to the edges of the world, would never forget their fallen progenitor. At the center of it all stood Yggdrasil, the world tree, its roots drinking from 3 sacred wells and its branches cradling the realms like fruit. It was the axis of existence, connecting Asgard's golden halls to the shadowy depths of hell. Yet even Yggdrasil was not immortal. The serpent Nidhogg gnawed at its roots, the deer nibbled its leaves, and the squirrel Ratatosk carried insults between the eagle perched atop and the dragon below. The tree was alive, but it was also dying, a mirror of the god's own fragile dominion. Because in Norse belief, creation and destruction were locked in an endless dance. The god's reign would not last. Ragnarök, the doom of the divine, loomed on the horizon. The prophecies spoke of the wolf Fenrir breaking his chains, the ship Naglfar sailing on a tide of dead men's nails, and the fire giant Surt setting the world ablaze. Even Odin, the Allfather, would fall to Fenrir's jaws, but this was not truly the end. From the ashes, a new world would rise, lush, green, and peopled by 2 survivors who hid in Yggdrasil's heartwood. The cycle would begin anew, as it always had, as it always would. While the Norse saw creation born from a giant's corpse, Hindu tradition speaks of something far more elegant, a golden egg floating in the void. This was Hiranyagarbha, the cosmic womb, from which the creator god Brahma emerged, bringing order to chaos. Unlike one-time creation myths, Hinduism envisions existence as an endless loop, a divine breath that inhales and exhales universes across unimaginable stretches of time. Brahma sculpts the world with the four Vedas as his blueprint, but his work is never permanent. Every creation cycle, or kalpa, lasts 4.32 billion human years, a single day in Brahma's life. When night falls, the universe dissolves into nothingness, only to be reborn when he awakens. Yet creation is only half the story. For every Brahma, there is Shiva, the destroyer whose cosmic dance maintains the balance. When the time comes for dissolution, pralaya, Shiva's Tandava, a whirl of fire and motion unravels the fabric of reality itself. Stars gutter out, mountains crumble to dust, and even time collapses into stillness. But this destruction isn't an end, it's a transformation. Like a sculptor recycling clay, Shiva's dance clears space for the next cycle of creation. The gods themselves are not spared, yet there's no grief in this surrender, only the inevitability of a universe that renews itself like seasons. What makes this cycle even more fascinating are the yugas, the four great ages that repeat within each kalpa. We're currently in the Kali Yuga, an era of strife and spiritual decay, but it's just one phase in a grand rotation. The golden Satya Yuga, where humans lived in harmony with divine truth, will return as surely as dawn follows night. This isn't linear history, it's a wheel forever turning. Ancient texts describe celestial mechanics with startling precision. 1,000 Mahayugas make a kalpa, and 100 Brahma years mark the lifespan of a cosmic egg before even Brahma himself is absorbed back into the supreme consciousness, Parabrahman, awaiting the next great exhale. The poetry of this myth lies in its scale. While other traditions might speak of floods or fires wiping the slate clean, Hindu cosmology operates on a canvas so vast it dwarfs human imagination. A single Brahma lives for 311 trillion human years before the entire system resets. Yet within this unfathomable expanse, every soul, every atom plays its part in the dance. The message is clear: destruction is not failure, but a necessary step in the rhythm of existence. Whether through Shiva's flames or the quiet decay of a yuga's end, the universe knows how to begin again, and so perhaps do we. Before light, before land, before even the concept of time, there was only chaos, a gaping chasm of nothingness where the very laws of existence had yet to take shape. Then something impossible happened. From that boundless void, Gaia, the Earth Mother, emerged fully formed, her body a vast landscape of mountains and valleys waiting to be filled. Alongside her rose Tartarus, the abyss beneath the abyss, a place so deep even shadows feared to linger, and Eros, the force of love and attraction, whose touch would ignite the spark of life itself. This was the first act of creation in Greek mythology, where order didn't so much defeat chaos as weave itself into its fabric, but creation was never peaceful. Gaia, alone and restless, gave birth to Uranus, the sky, who became both her equal and her oppressor. Together they birthed the Titans, 12 colossal beings who would shape the cosmos, but Uranus, fearing their power, imprisoned them in Gaia's womb. The pain became unbearable, and Gaia conspired with her youngest Titan, Cronus, who ambushed Uranus with a sickle, severing his reign and casting his blood into the sea. From those drops rose the Furies, avengers of injustice, and Aphrodite, born from the foam where flesh met waves. This act of violence wasn't just a changing of the god, it set a pattern of betrayal that would echo through every generation of gods. Cronus, now king, repeated his father's mistakes. Swallowing his children whole to avoid a prophecy of overthrow, he ruled until his wife Re smuggled their sixth son, Zeus, to safety. Hidden in a Cretan cave, Zeus grew powerful enough to free his siblings, vomiting forth the gods who would become Olympus, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. What followed was the Titanomachy, a 10-year war that shook the cosmos. The Titans, led by Cronus, clashed with Zeus and his allies, their battle so fierce they scorched the earth and split the heavens. Victory came only when Zeus freed the Cyclopes and Hecatoncheires, the 100-handed giants, tipping the scales with thunderbolts and raw force. The Titans were cast into Tartarus and the Olympians claimed their throne. Yet even Zeus, now lord of the sky, couldn't escape the cycle. A prophecy warned that his first wife, Metis, would bear a child greater than him. Swallowing her to avert fate, he unknowingly set the stage for Athena's birth from his own skull, a twist that proved destiny could be delayed, not denied. The Greeks understood power as a flame, bright, consuming, and always at risk of being snuffed out. Their myths didn't just explain how the world began, they whispered a warning. Every creation carries the seeds of its own destruction, from the void of chaos to the halls of Olympus, and no ruler, divine or mortal, holds the throne forever. In the beginning, there was only none, an endless, dark ocean where nothing stirred, nothing breathed, nothing existed beyond the silent depths. Then, without warning, a ripple broke the stillness. From those primordial waters rose Atum, the first god, who willed himself into being with a single thought. Some say he emerged as a blazing hill, the first land piercing the watery void. Others claim he took the form of a serpent, shedding his old skin to reveal the world anew. But one truth remained: Atum stood alone, and from that solitude creation began. With nothing but his own shadow and the power of his voice, Atum birthed the first divine pair, Shu, the god of air, and Tefnut, the goddess of moisture. They were not born in the way mortals understand, but spoken into existence, their names echoing across the emptiness. Yet creation came at a cost. Shu and Tefnut soon wandered into the darkness, lost to none's depths. Atum, desperate, sent his eye, a blazing disk of fire, to find them. When they returned, his tears of joy fell upon the earth, and from those tears sprang the first humans. This was no orderly creation. It was an act of longing, a testament to how even gods could not escape loneliness. But the story doesn't end there. Shu and Tefnut gave life to Geb, the earth, and Nut, the sky, whose bodies arched over the world in an eternal embrace. Their love was so consuming that Ra, the sun god, forbade them from uniting except during the 5 days outside the year, days when Nut bore Osiris, Isis, Set, Nephthys, and Horus the elder. These 5, with Atum, Shu, Tefnut, Geb, and Nut, formed the Ennead, the 9 gods who ruled the cosmos. Yet harmony was fleeting. Osiris, the wise and just king, was betrayed by his brother Set, the god of storms and chaos. Set's jealousy drove him to murder, dismembering Osiris and scattering his pieces across Egypt. But Isis, Osiris's devoted wife, refused to let death claim him. She gathered his fragments, weaving them together with magic and love, resurrecting him long enough to conceive their son, Horus. This act of defiance against destruction became the heart of Egyptian belief. Death was not an end, but a doorway to renewal. And every night the cycle repeated. Ra's solar bark sailed through the underworld where Apophis, the serpent of chaos, lurked in the black waters, waiting to devour the sun and plunge the world into eternal night. But Ra never fought alone. With the help of Set's brute strength and the magic of Isis, he wounded Apophis, forcing the serpent to retreat only to return the next dusk. This was the unending dance of Egyptian cosmology, creation from chaos, death leading to rebirth, and light forever wrestling with the dark. The message was clear: chaos could never be fully conquered, but neither would it ever triumph. Balance was the only law, and even the gods obeyed it. Before order, before gods, there was only Tiamat, the primordial sea, a roiling chaos of saltwater and storms, her body stretching farther than any horizon. Alongside her swam Apsu, the sweet waters beneath the earth, and from their mingling the first gods were born. But this was no peaceful creation. The young deities, Anu, and the rest were so loud in their revelry that Apsu plotted to destroy them, craving the silence of the old void. It was who struck first, slaying Apsu and claiming his dominion, unknowingly setting the stage for a far greater conflict. Tiamat, once a nurturing force, now raged as a mother betrayed. She birthed an army of monsters, venomous serpents, lion-headed demons, and the 11-headed Mushasu dragon, all led by her new consort, Kingu, to whom she granted the Tablet of Destinies, the very power that dictated the cosmos. The gods trembled. None could stand against her fury until Marduk, E's son, stepped forward with a condition. If he defeated Tiamat, he would rule supreme. What followed wasn't just a battle, it was the birth of the world as the Babylonians knew it. Marduk, armed with winds and storms crafted by the gods, rode his chariot of clouds straight into Tiamat's jaws. He hurled a tempest into her belly, swelling her until she could no longer close her mouth, then pierced her heart with an arrow. As her colossal corpse floated in the void, Marduk did the unthinkable. He split her body like a clamshell, raising half to form the heavens, the other half to shape the earth. Her tears became the Tigris and Euphrates, her ribs the arches of the sky, and her snarling face now lurked beneath the world, a reminder of chaos subdued but never gone. King's blood was next. Marduk executed Kingu, and from his remains, mixed with clay, the first humans were molded beings destined to serve the gods forever. This was the heart of the Enuma Elish, Babylon's creation epic, recited not as mere history but as a living truth. Every year during the Akitu festival, the myth was reenacted in grand spectacle. The king would kneel before Marduk's statue, stripped of his crown, as priests slapped him, a ritual humiliation to prove even rulers owed their power to the gods. The people cheered as the story unfolded anew, a cosmic drama reminding them that order was fragile, hard-won, and demanded reverence, yet beneath it all lay a haunting truth. Tiamat wasn't truly gone. She lingered in the floods that swallowed cities, in the storms that tore through fields, and in the quiet dread that chaos might one day rise again. The Babylonians understood what we so often forget: creation isn't a one-time event. It's a daily struggle, a balance struck over and over between the forces that build and those that unravel. Marduk's victory was eternal, but so was the whisper of the sea. The gods of the Popol Vuh weren't satisfied with silence. They longed for beings who could speak their names, sing their praises, and keep the sacred calendars, beings who could witness the dawn. But getting it right took more than one try. Their first attempt, humans molded from wet earth. These creatures could talk, but their words were muddled, their bodies crumbled under rain, and their minds couldn't grasp the sacred. Disappointed, the gods sent a great flood to wipe them away. Next came figures carved from wood. They walked, they spoke, even multiplied, but their hearts were hollow. They forgot their creators, so the gods unleashed a fiery rain, grinding their wooden bodies into dust. Only the monkeys swinging through the trees remained as echoes of this failed experiment. Then came the divine breakthrough, maize, golden, life-giving, sacred. The gods ground corn into dough, mixed it with water, and shaped the first true humans, the ancestors of the Maya. These beings could see, speak, and most importantly, remember. Their blood carried the wisdom of the gods, and their breath kept time with the turning stars. But this perfection came at a price. The creators feared their new children might rival them in wisdom, so they clouded their vision, just enough to keep them humble. But creation was only half the story. The underworld, Xibalba, loomed beneath the earth, a labyrinth of deadly houses where the lords of decay ruled. When the arrogant twins Hun-Hunappu and Vucub-Hunappu challenged Xibalba's lords to a ball game, they lost their heads literally. Hun-Hunappu's skull, hung in a tree, spat into the hand of the maiden Exquic, conceiving the hero twins, Hunappu and Exbalank. These twins weren't just avengers, they were tricksters, artists of deception. They outplayed Xibalba's lords in their own game, letting themselves be burned and reborn from the ashes, dancing as gods before revealing their true forms. Their victory wasn't just personal, it reset the balance between life and death, ensuring maize could grow and dawn could break. This wasn't just myth to the Maya, it was mathematics. The hero twins' journey mirrored the sun's passage through the underworld each night, their resurrection echoing the cycles of planting and harvest. The sacred calendar, with its precise counts of days, tied human life to celestial patterns, proving time wasn't a line but a wheel. Even the world's end wasn't final, just another turn. The long count calendar's so-called doomsday predictions, they weren't about apocalypse, they were reminders. Every 5,125 years, the cosmos held its breath, ready to renew. The lesson was clear: creation demands trial, destruction demands courage, and every ending carries the seed of a beginning. From the moment the world was nothing but a vast, sleeping plain, the ancestors walked singing rivers into existence, shaping mountains with their hands and dreaming the first dawn into being. This is the Aboriginal Dreamtime, known as Jukurpa or Alchiringa, where creation wasn't an event but an ongoing conversation between the land and its first peoples. Unlike myths with clear beginnings and ends, the Dreamtime exists outside of time entirely, a dimension where past, present, and future blur into one eternal moment. Every rock, every river, every creature carries the fingerprints of these ancestral beings, their journeys etched into the earth like a living map. Take the rainbow serpent, known by many names: Yulunga in Arnhem Land, Ungud in the Kimberley. This colossal being slithered across the barren earth, her body carving valleys where water pooled, her scales sparking wildfires that cleared the way for new growth. Where she rested, her coils left winding ridges. Where she drank, springs bubbled up. But the rainbow serpent wasn't just a creator. When angered, she could summon floods or droughts, reminding all life that destruction and renewal were two sides of the same sacred story. To this day, her presence lingers in the monsoons that drench the north and the shimmering heat haze over desert salt flats. Then there are the Wati Kutjara, the two lizard men of the western desert, whose chase across the land formed the Peterman Ranges. Exhausted, they collapsed into the earth, their bodies becoming rock formations that still radiate the heat of their flight. Or the Wajalag sisters, whose dance summoned the first monsoon, only to be swallowed by the rainbow serpent they awakened, their spirits rising as storm clouds that return each wet season. These stories aren't just explanations, they're living contracts. A mountain isn't just rock, it's the frozen gesture of an ancestor. A waterhole isn't just a resource, it's a promise made in the dreaming, demanding respect. This interconnectedness extends to the very fabric of existence. The Yolngu people of northern Australia describe how the Jankawu sisters, carrying their sacred digging sticks, wandered the coast, striking the ground to release fresh water and planting the seeds of human clans. But their story doesn't end in the distant past. When a Yolngu child is born, their spirit enters the world through the very sites the Jankawu sisters touched, binding each person to both the land and the ancestral saga. To harm the land isn't just ecological damage, it's a rupture in the dreaming itself. Yet the Dreamtime isn't locked in stasis. New layers of meaning emerge as elders pass down stories, adjusting them to reflect changing realities. The volcanic eruptions that formed the Atherton Tablelands millennia ago, they're remembered in Gugu Bad Hun lore as the fire spewed by angry spirits. The rising sea levels that drowned ancient coastlines, they live in Yidinji stories of the moon's great tides swallowing ancestral camps. This flexibility reveals a profound truth: the Dreamtime isn't a relic. It's a framework for understanding disruptions, whether natural or man-made, as part of a grander cycle. What makes these myths extraordinary is their refusal to separate creation from destruction or humans from nature. When lightning ignites bushfires, it's not disaster, it's the ancestral blue-tongued lizard scouring the land so new seeds can sprout. When floods erase familiar landmarks, they're not erasing history, they're revealing older stories buried beneath. Even death is just another thread in the pattern as spirits return to the dreaming to be reborn. There's no once upon a time here, no final curtain. Just an endless now where every sunrise is the first sunrise, and every footprint traces the steps of those who walked the world awake. In the beginning, there was only the sky and the marsh, no land, no life, just endless waters stretching beneath the heavens where Olajumer, the supreme god, reigned in absolute stillness. But Olajumer did not shape the world with his own hands. Instead, he summoned Obatala, the god of purity and creation, entrusting him with a sacred task: descend from the heavens on a golden chain, carrying a snail shell filled with sand, a white hen, and a palm nut. This was the Yoruba beginning, where creation was not an act of solitary divinity, but a collaboration between the ultimate source and the deities who walked the earth. Obatala poured the sand onto the marshy waters, then released the hen, whose scratching claws spread the earth into solid ground. The first land called Ife, the sacred city where all life would begin. With a palm nut, he planted the first tree, its roots anchoring the earth. Then, kneeling in the red clay, Obatala began to mold figures in the likeness of the gods. He shaped heads carefully, breathing life into them with Olajumer's permission. But here the myth takes a turn. In some stories, Obatala grew weary, his hands unsteady from palm wine. The figures he made in this state were flawed, some blind, some lame, and these became the first people with disabilities, teaching the Yoruba a profound lesson. Imperfection is not punishment, but part of the divine plan. Yet no creation myth is complete without the shadow of chaos, and in Yoruba cosmology, that role belongs to Eshu, the trickster. While Obatala represents order and craftsmanship, Eshu is the force that disrupts, the divine provocateur who ensures balance. He doesn't destroy for destruction's sake, he unravels predictability so the world remains dynamic. One famous tale tells of two friends who swore eternal loyalty until Eshu, wearing a hat that was black on one side and red on the other, walked between their farms. When each later described the stranger's hat color, they accused one another of lying, and their bond shattered. The message: even the strongest plans are fragile when confronted with perspective. This interplay between Obatala's order and Eshu's chaos is what gives Yoruba belief its depth. The world wasn't made perfect, it was made alive, subject to change and chance. Even Olajumer, though supreme, doesn't micromanage. He allows his orishas, the deities, to govern their domains, stepping in only when absolutely necessary. It's a cosmology that mirrors human experience. We strive for stability, but it's the unexpected twists, Eshu's mischief, that force us to adapt, grow, and sometimes rebuild. And rebuild they do. The Yoruba understanding of destruction isn't apocalyptic, it's cyclical. When the world grows corrupt, Olajumer sends a great flood to cleanse it, as in the story of Oya, the storm goddess, whose winds and rains sweep away the old to make space for the new. But unlike myths where floods signify divine wrath, here the deluge is a reset, a return to the marshy beginnings from which Obatala once sculpted the earth. The Yoruba don't fear endings, they expect them, preparing for the day when the chain will lower again and creation will begin anew. What's striking is how these ancient ideas resonate today. The Yoruba creation myth doesn't just explain origins, it offers a framework for resilience. If Obatala's flawed figures teach acceptance and Eshu's tricks demand flexibility, then Olajumer's distance is a reminder. The divine doesn't control, it empowers. Whether facing personal trials or collective upheavals, the lesson is the same. Chaos isn't the enemy of order, it's the whetstone that sharpens it, and when the world feels like it's unraveling, remember, even the trickster has his place. Without him, there would be no stories to tell. For the Aztecs, time wasn't a straight line, it was a wheel of fire and blood, each revolution marking the death of one world and the desperate birth of another. Theirs was a cosmos balanced on the edge of chaos, where 5 suns had already risen and fallen, each extinguished in its own catastrophic way. The first era, Nahui Oslotl, the son of jaguars, ended when towering beasts descended from the stars, tearing apart every last human. Then came Nahui Ehekatl, the son of wind, where hurricanes scoured the earth until nothing remained but monkeys clinging to broken trees. Next, Nahui Quiahuatl, the son of fire rain, turned the sky into a furnace, while Nahui Atl, the son of water, drowned the world in a flood so vast it took 52 years to recede. Each apocalypse wasn't just an ending, it was a cosmic reset, a lesson written in devastation. Now we live under Nahui Olan, the 5th sun, its name meaning movement because this world teeters on the edge of collapse, destined to shatter in earthquakes. But why? The answer lies in the god's sacrifice at Teotihuacan. According to legend, when the previous suns had perished, the deities gathered in darkness, knowing a new era required a god to leap into the divine flame and become the sun. The proud Tecusistecatl volunteered, but when the moment came, he faltered. Instead, the humble Nanahuatzin, covered in sores and deemed insignificant, threw himself into the fire without hesitation. Enraged by his rival's cowardice, the gods then flung Tecusistecatl into the flames as well, creating 2 suns. But a world couldn't endure such brilliance, so one of the gods hurled a rabbit at Tecusistecal's face, dimming his light into the moon. Yet even this sacrifice wasn't enough to secure the 5th sun's survival. The sun, born from Nanahuatzin's self-immolation, refused to move across the sky without payment in kind. So the gods made the ultimate bargain. They would feed the sun their own blood, and humanity would forever after mirror that offering. This is why the Aztecs practiced ritual sacrifice on such a staggering scale. Hearts torn from living chests weren't acts of cruelty. They were cosmic currency, blood tribute to keep the sun from stalling mid-heaven and plunging the world into eternal night. Without it, the earthquakes would come sooner, swallowing cities whole. The Aztecs didn't just fear the end, they marked its approach with mathematical precision. Their calendar stone, often mistaken as a mere artifact, was a harbinger of doom. At its center crouched Tanatia, the sun god, his tongue a sacrificial knife, flanked by the 4 previous suns' glyphs, a reminder that this age too would fall. Every 52 years, during the binding of the year's ceremony, priests would extinguish all fires across the empire, watching the night sky for omen stars. If the Pleiades crossed the zenith, the sun would rise again. A new cycle would begin. But if the stars failed to align, the Tzitzimaime, the star demons, would descend to devour what remained. What's chilling isn't just the inevitability of collapse, it's the Aztecs' defiance in the face of it. They built an empire knowing it was temporary, waged wars to capture sacrifices rather than kill, all to stave off the inevitable. Theirs was a philosophy of urgency. If doom looms, make the present matter. Modern archaeologists once dismissed their rituals as barbarism, but now we recognize the profound logic beneath. When your world could end in the next tremor, every act from planting maize to raising temples becomes sacred. The 5th sun still hangs above us, its movement a question. Will it falter? The Aztecs would say that depends. Are we willing to pay the price to keep it burning? Before time had a name, before the heavens had shape, there was only darkness, a swirling, formless chaos clasped tight inside a cosmic egg. For 18,000 years, silence reigned within that shell until a force stirred in its depths. Pangu, the first being, awoke in that blackness, his limbs coiled tight against his chest. With a roar that shattered eternity, he swung his axe, a single blow that split the egg in 2. The lighter half rose, becoming the sky, heavy with the breath of Yong, the bright, active force of the universe. The heavier half sank beneath his feet, solidifying into earth, thick with the weight of Yin, the dark, receptive essence, but creation was only the beginning. To prevent the halves from collapsing back into each other, Pangu planted his feet on the earth and pressed his hands against the heavens, pushing them apart with every passing day. For another 18,000 years, he held the cosmos aloft, growing 10 feet taller with each sunrise until the distance between sky and earth was fixed. When his work was done, exhausted beyond measure, Pangu finally lay down to rest, and in that moment his body became the world itself. His breath became the wind and clouds, his voice the rolling thunder. His left eye transformed into the sun, his right into the moon, while his veins stretched across the land as rivers and his muscles hardened into mountains. The fleas on his skin, they became the first humans wandering a world sculpted from divine sacrifice. Yet the story doesn't end with Pangu's death. The universe he shaped was delicate, prone to imbalances. When the pillars of heaven cracked and floods ravaged the earth, it was Nuwa, the serpent-tailed goddess, who stepped forward to mend the broken sky. She melted stones of 5 colors to patch the gaps, slew a giant turtle to use its legs as new pillars, and even crafted tiny figures from yellow clay, breathing life into them to repopulate the land. But Nuwa's repairs came with a caveat. The heavens would never be as perfect as Pangu had left them. The repaired patches tilted the sky slightly northwest, explaining why the sun, moon, and stars drift in that direction. This interplay of creation and imperfection mirrors China's dynastic cycles, where order and chaos wage an endless tug of war. Emperors ruled with the mandate of heaven, but that mandate could be revoked. Droughts, floods, or rebellions were signs the cosmos demanded change. Each dynasty rose like a new Pangu, imposing structure on chaos, only to fracture like Nuwa's cracked sky over time. The Qin dynasty's brutal unification collapsed under its own rigidity. The Han's golden age dissolved into corruption. The Tang's cultural flourishing ended in rebellion. Yet each fall birthed something new, just as Pangu's death gave life to the world. What makes this mythology so enduring is its acceptance of flux. Where other traditions might seek a final, perfect creation, Chinese cosmology embraces the inevitability of repair, collapse, and renewal. Pangu's sacrifice wasn't a one-time event. It was the first note in an unending symphony of yin and yang, where every act of destruction plants the seeds for the next Genesis. Even today, when earthquakes shake the land or floods swallow cities, the old stories whisper, this too is part of the pattern. The egg may crack, but from its fragments another world will rise. In the swirling mists before time, 2 gods stood upon the floating bridge of heaven: Izanagi, the inviting male, and Izanami, the inviting female. The primordial waters stretched endlessly below them, waiting to be shaped. Armed with Aim Nonuboko, a jeweled spear gifted by the elder gods, Izanagi stirred the brine. As he lifted the spear, droplets cascaded back into the sea, solidifying into the first island, Onagoro. Stepping onto this newborn land, the divine couple built a pillar and a lofty hall, performing a sacred marriage ritual. Circling the pillar in opposite directions, they met on the other side. But when Izanami spoke first in greeting, their union bore a cursed child, Haruko, as formless as the sea foam. The gods whispered that the woman's initial voice had upset the natural order, a warning etched into Shinto tradition. Balance must begin with the masculine. Their second attempt held to this rule. Izanagi spoke first, and from their union sprang the 8 great islands of Japan and 6 minor ones, each with its own spirit and song. But creation exacted a price. As Izanami labored to birth Kagetsuchi, the fire god, his scorching touch seared her flesh, mortally wounding her. Her death throes birthed more deities. From her vomit came mountain gods. From her tears sprang river spirits until at last her body cooled into the rocky slopes of Mount Hiba. Grief-stricken, Izanagi's sorrow turned to rage. He beheaded Kagetsuchi with his sword, and from the fire god's spilled blood emerged 8 more gods of swords and storms, weaving violence into the fabric of creation. Yet Izanagi couldn't accept loss. He descended into Yomi, the shadowed underworld, bargaining with Izanami to return. She agreed but warned him not to look upon her. In the darkness, he lit a comb's tooth as a torch, and the flickering flame revealed her corpse, swollen and crawling with maggots. Horrified, he fled as Izanami shrieked, unleashing the hag-like Shikome to chase him. Blocking Yomi's entrance with a boulder, Izanagi severed their bond, declaring divorce between life and death. Enraged, Izanami vowed to claim 1,000 lives daily. He countered by pledging to birth 1,500. This grim pact became the rhythm of existence-death's hunger forever matched by life's resilience. When Izanagi cleansed himself in the river Takabana, purification birthed the sun goddess Amaterasu from his left eye, the moon god Tsukuyomi from his right, and the storm god Susanoo from his nose. These three would shape Japan's spiritual heart, Amaterasu's light nurturing the imperial line, Susanoo's tempests forging legends like the slaying of the 8-headed serpent Yamata no Orochi. But beneath these epics lingered the lesson of Yomi. Decay and renewal were twins, just as Izanagi and Izanami had been. Every cherry blossom's fall, every volcano's eruption echoed their story. Shinto shrines still honor this cycle. At Izumo Taisha, priests reenact the divine marriage, while Torii gates mark thresholds between worlds, mirroring the boulder that sealed Yomi. Even modern festivals like Ohari, where paper dolls carry sins to be burned, trace back to Izanagi's ritual cleansing. Unlike linear cosmologies, Shinto embraces spiral time. Gods aren't distant creators but active forces in a world where every ending, whether a withered leaf or a crumbled dynasty, nourishes the next beginning. The question isn't whether the divine will return, but how we'll recognize it in the turning of the tide. For the Celts, the world was never just what the eye could see. It was a veil, thin as morning mist, hiding the other world where gods walked among silver trees and golden rivers. This wasn't some distant heaven, it was a parallel realm achingly close where time flowed differently and magic shimmered in the air like heat off summer stones. The doorway could be a fairy mound, a sudden fog, or the stroke of twilight, any moment where the boundaries between mortal and divine grew soft. And at the heart of this belief stood the Tuatha De Danann, the tribe of the goddess Donu, who arrived in Ireland not on ships but wrapped in dark clouds, landing on a mountain so violently the land itself recoiled. Their coming marked a turning point in the cosmic struggle between order and chaos. The Tuatha De Danann, masters of poetry, healing, and war, faced the Fomorians, monstrous beings of storm and shadow who embodied the untamed wild. The Fomorians weren't just enemies, they were necessary darkness, the counterbalance to the Tuatha De Danann's radiant skill. Their epic clash at the First Battle of Mag Tuatha wasn't merely a war, it was the world's labor pains. Nuada, the Tuatha De's king, lost his arm to the Fomorian champion Esreng, proving even gods could bleed. Yet from that loss came ingenuity. The physician Dian Set forged Nuada a silver arm, and later the smith Cradney crafted one of living flesh, blurring the line between mortal craft and divine power. Victory came at a price. The Tuatha De Danann's triumph over the Fomorians wasn't absolute. Balor of the Evil Eye, the Fomorian king, fell to his own grandson Lug, the radiant hero of many talents, but the scars of battle lingered. The land itself bore the marks, and the Tuatha De Danann, though victorious, began to fade. When the Milesians, ancestors of the Irish people, arrived centuries later, the gods didn't fight for dominance. Instead, they struck a bargain, the surface world for mortals, while they retreated into the hollow hills and shimmering realms beneath lakes, becoming the Ayeshia, the people of the mounds. This fading wasn't defeat, it was transformation. The Tuatha De Danann didn't vanish, they became the spirits whispered about in hearthside tales, the presences felt at liminal places where the wind carried music no mortal hand could play. Their stories explain why Celtic festivals like Samhain and Beltane were so potent. Those were the nights when the veil between worlds frayed and the gods might ride again. Even now, their legacy pulses in places like Newgrange, where winter solstice light pierces ancient passage tombs like a spear of dawn, or in the way a sudden stillness in a forest can feel like the breath of something older than time. What makes the Celtic creation myth so compelling is its refusal to draw hard lines. The gods didn't create the world from nothing. They shaped it through conflict, compromise, and finally, coexistence. The otherworld isn't a reward or punishment. It's a reminder that wonder lies just beyond the edges of the ordinary. And when the mist rolls in over an Irish hill, or a standing stone casts a shadow too long for the hour, the old stories whisper, the Tuatha De Danann never left. They're waiting just out of sight for those who know how to look. The icy waters of the Arctic hold more than just fish. They guard the wrath of Sedna, the one-fingered goddess who rules the depths with a grip as unyielding as the permafrost. Her story begins not with divinity but with betrayal. Long ago, Sedna was a mortal woman, beautiful and strong-willed, whose father promised her in marriage to a mysterious hunter. But when the hunter revealed himself as a bird spirit in disguise, trapping her on a distant island, her father sailed to rescue her. Panicked by the spirit's fury as he fled with Sedna, the father made an unthinkable choice. He hurled his own daughter overboard. Clinging to the kayak's edge, her fingers turned to claws as he hacked them away, joint by joint, until she sank beneath the waves, her severed digits transforming into seals, whales, and all the creatures of the sea. Now Sedna sits at the bottom of the ocean, her hair tangled with seaweed, her anger as vast as the tides. When hunters grow greedy or neglect their rituals, she clutches her stumped hands, refusing to release the animals needed for survival. Storms whip, the ice flows into chaos, winds howl like grieving spirits, and the people starve until a shaman dares the perilous journey to her realm. Braving freezing currents and crushing pressure, the shaman must comb the knots from Sedna's hair, soothing her rage before she will allow the sea mammals to return. This isn't just a cautionary tale, it's a mirror of Inuit survival ethics. The myth explains why no part of a hunted seal is wasted, why taboos surrounding marine life are strict, and why elders teach that arrogance toward nature invites disaster. Sedna's storms aren't arbitrary punishment, they're the direct consequence of broken reciprocity. Unlike gods who demand worship, she demands respect not for her power, but for the fragile pact between humans and the animals they rely on. Modern climate change lends the story eerie new weight. As warming seas disrupt traditional hunting cycles, some Inuit elders interpret the vanishing ice as Sedna's renewed displeasure, not at individuals this time, but at a world that has forgotten its debts. The myth's brilliance lies in its realism. Sedna isn't a distant, all-forgiving mother goddess. She's a wronged spirit who remembers every cut. Yet her mercy exists not in absolving humans, but in offering a path to restoration. Comb her hair, honor the hunt, and she might loosen her grip. The choice, as always, is ours. In the velvet dark before dawn, the Skyfather Rangi clung to the Earth Mother Papa in an embrace so tight their children lived trapped between them, curled in perpetual twilight. These children weren't mere mortals, they were gods, each embodying forces of nature, Tane of the forests, Tangaroa of the oceans, Rongo of cultivated foods, and Tumatoanga, the fiery god of war. For eons, they existed in the cramped gloom, whispering plans until the day Tane, wearied by the darkness, pressed his feet against Papa's chest and his hands against Rangi's shoulders, heaving with all his strength. Tendons strained, sweat fell like rain, and with a groan that echoed through the cosmos, sky and earth tore apart. Light flooded the space between them, and the world as the Maori know it was born. Yet this act of creation was also one of sorrow. Rangi's tears became the morning dew, his mournful sighs the mist that rises from valleys. Papa's trembling birthed earthquakes, her sighs the rustling grasses that yearn for reunion. The gods, now free, faced the consequences of their choice. Tumatoanga, angriest of them all, turned his wrath not just on his brothers, waging war against Tane's forests and Tangaroa's fish, but also on humanity, teaching people the art of violence. Only Toherametia, god of storms, refused to participate. Loyal to Rangi, he fled to the heavens, where he still hurls tempests at his siblings below, his fury a reminder that some rifts never fully heal. Far across the Pacific, another creation story unfolds, one written in fire rather than separation. Pele, the Hawaiian volcano goddess, didn't just shape the land, she devoured and remade it with every eruption. Driven from her homeland by her sister Namakakahai, goddess of the sea, Pele fled across the islands, digging pits with her sacred staff power. Where she struck, magma flared, but each time, Namaka's waves crashed in to quench her fires, forcing Pele to move again. Their battle sculpted the Hawaiian archipelago, from the smoldering calderas of Kilauea to the drowned volcanic slopes of Maui's coast. Pele's legacy isn't just destruction, it's regeneration. When her lava swallows forests, it also births new land, black sand beaches, fertile soil, and even the obsidian blades used in sacred rituals. Offerings of flowers, food, and chants still appease her, not out of fear but respect for her dual nature. The Hawaiians understood what modern geology confirms. Islands rise and fall in an endless cycle. What Pele burns today, she'll rebuild tomorrow. The contrast between these myths reveals a profound truth about Polynesian cosmology. Where the Maori story emphasizes the pain of necessary separation, the cost of bringing light to the world, the Hawaiian tradition celebrates creation through relentless transformation. Rangi and Papa's children chose order over unity. Pele chooses neither, instead embracing chaos as the crucible of renewal. Yet both traditions share a reverence for balance. Just as Tohiramatea's storms cleanse as they destroy, Pele's fires take only to give again. Modern science echoes these ancient intuitions. The Pacific Ring of Fire, where tectonic plates collide, mirrors the god's struggles. Continents rift apart like Rangi and Papa, while volcanoes like Pele rewrite the landscape daily. The Maori speak of Wakapapa, the genealogical bonds linking humans to gods and land. Hawaiians chant Kumulipo, creation hymns that bind them to the very lava underfoot. These aren't just stories, they're maps to navigating a world where creation and destruction are two faces of the same force. When a new island emerges from the sea, or when a storm tears through ancient trees, the old voices whisper, "This is the way the world has always been remade." Long before the first fire temples flickered across Persia, the universe was divided not by chance but by a choice. On one side stood Ahura Mazda, the radiant lord of wisdom and light, whose very essence wove order into the fabric of existence. Opposite him loomed Angra Mainyu, the destructive spirit of chaos and deceit, a whirlwind of darkness seeking to unravel all that was pure. This wasn't just a battle of gods, it was the foundation of Zoroastrian belief, where every sunrise and shadow reflected the eternal struggle between Ashad truth and Drudge falsehood. Their conflict began with creation itself. Ahura Mazda fashioned the world in 6 stages, first the celestial vault of stone, then the primordial waters, the earth, plants, animals, and finally humanity, each layer a bulwark against Angra Mainyu's corruption. But the dark spirit retaliated with equal force. Where Ahura Mazda made the cow, Angra Mainyu bred disease to sicken it. Where light carved valleys, darkness filled them with venomous serpents. Even the human soul became a battleground. Ahura Mazda gifted mortals with free will and conscience, while Angra Mainyu whispered lies, twisting virtue into vice. Yet Zoroastrianism's brilliance lies in its rejection of passive doom. This cosmic war isn't fought in distant heavens, it's waged daily through human choices. Farmers tilling soil, rulers dispensing justice, families keeping sacred hearths aflame, all become soldiers in light's army. The ritual of maintaining a fire temple's eternal flame isn't just worship, it's defiance against the creeping dark. Even now, in the towers of silence where Zoroastrians lay their dead to avoid contaminating the earth, the spiritual stakes are clear. Corruption must be quarantined, not embraced. The promise of final victory comes with Frashokrati, the great renewal. Ancient texts describe a day when Saoshyant, a messiah born of a virgin, will lead humanity in a last battle against Angra Mainyu's forces. The earth itself will shudder, mountains melting into rivers of molten metal through which all souls must pass. The righteous will walk unharmed, their steps like warm milk, while the wicked will burn away their impurities. In that purifying fire, even Angra Mainyu's lies will dissolve, and the world will be remade not as a fleeting paradise, but as a perfected reflection of Ahura Mazda's original vision. What makes this eschatology extraordinary is its optimism. Unlike myths where destruction is an end, Frashokrati is a cosmic reset button. The metal river isn't punishment, it's alchemy, transmuting suffering into wisdom. This belief shaped Persian empires where kings saw themselves as Ahura Mazda's stewards, tasked with upholding justice until the final dawn. Modern Zoroastrians, though few, still tend sacred fires in Mumbai and Yazd, keeping alive a 3,000-year-old conviction. Darkness may rise, but light sets the terms. Every act of courage, every spark of truth, is a stitch in the tapestry of that ultimate victory. In the beginning, there was only Rod, the primordial void, an endless expanse of potential humming with unshaped energy. From this nothingness emerged two forces destined to dance in eternal opposition. Belobog, the radiant god of light and order, and Chernobog, the shadowy lord of chaos and darkness. They weren't enemies so much as counterweights, each necessary to spin the wheel of existence. Where Belobog's touch brought the first sunrise, spilling gold across the meadows, Chernobog's breath stirred the storms that nourished the soil. Together, they shaped the world like potters at a shared wheel, one molding mountains while the other carved valleys, their rivalry birthing the rhythm of life itself. This balance played out most vividly in the myth of Cupola, the sun god whose fate was tied to the seasons. At midsummer's peak, when Cupola blazed brightest in the sky, Chernobog's minions, led by the serpent Veils, would drag him into the underworld. The days grew shorter, crops withered, and winter's grasp tightened. But Belobog never surrendered. With the help of Perun, the thunder god, he would descend into Nav, the shadow realm, fighting through illusions and trials to retrieve Cupola's stolen light. The sun's resurrection at the winter solstice wasn't just a celestial event. It was a triumph celebrated with bonfires so large they mirrored Cupola's radiance, their sparks carrying prayers for renewal into the freezing night. The duality extended beyond gods to the very fabric of Slavic belief. Villagers whispered that Chernobog's influence waxed during the long nights of December, when diseases spread and wolves prowled closer to homes. Yet even then, they knew his presence wasn't purely malevolent. The harsh cold killed pests in the soil, and the snow's hush forced introspection, a time to mend tools and tell stories by the hearth. Belobog's return in spring wasn't a defeat of darkness but a recalibration. The Maslenitsa festival, where pancakes symbolizing the sun were devoured by the dozen, embodied this harmony. The sweetness of honey celebrated light's victory, while the burning of straw effigies acknowledged darkness's necessary role. This interplay between forces shaped Slavic rituals down to the smallest details. Farmers sowed seeds under a waxing moon, Belobog's domain, but harvested during the waning phase, Chernobog's time. Brides wore red and white embroidery, threads intertwining like the god's influences, while amulets of the Kolovrat, a sun wheel, were carved with equal-armed crosses to signify balance. Even the legendary Zime, the multi-headed dragon, wasn't purely evil. While it could bring drought, its defeat by a hero like Dobrynya Nikitich ensured rains would come again, an echo of the eternal tug of war between order and chaos. What sets the Slavic tradition apart is its refusal to vilify darkness entirely. Chernobog wasn't Satan, he was the frost that hardened timber for building, the decay that fed new growth. When Christian missionaries arrived, they were baffled by peasants who still left offerings at crossroads not to curse, but to honor both forces. The old stories endured, hidden in folk tales where Baba Yaga's hut spun between worlds, or in the way a single log, half charred and half golden, could tell the whole story of creation. The lesson wasn't about choosing sides, but understanding that even the longest night carries the promise of dawn. the gods of Sumer didn't just tire of humanity, they were driven to the brink by the unbearable racket of civilization. In the dusty tablets of the Eridu Genesis, humanity's first recorded creation story, the divine council didn't unleash a flood out of wrath or moral judgment. They did it because they couldn't sleep. Cities had grown too loud, the clamor of markets and festivals rising like a storm to the heavens until the gods convened in desperation. The noise of mankind has become too intense, they lamented. Let us wipe them out that silence may reign again. Only Enki, the cunning god of wisdom, took pity. Whispering through the reed walls of Ziusadra's hut, he revealed the coming deluge, instructing the righteous king to build an ark and preserve the seed of all living creatures. This wasn't just a story, it was a cultural bombshell. Written in the 18th century BC, the Eridu Genesis predates even the Epic of Gilgamesh, making it the oldest surviving flood narrative. Unlike later myths, the destruction feels almost bureaucratic, a divine zoning complaint rather than a moral reckoning. There's no mention of human wickedness, just divine annoyance at the relentless buzz of progress. When the floodwaters receded, Ziusadra offered a sacrifice so fragrant it soothed the god's frayed nerves. They granted him immortality, not as a reward for virtue, but as a consolation prize for their own overreaction. The tale evolved as it traveled. By the time it reached Babylon, becoming the Atrahasis epic, the gods' motives had sharpened. Humanity's noise was recast as rebellion, their multiplying numbers straining the earth's resources, their clamor a symbol of disobedience. The flood became punishment, not just pest control. Yet Enki, renamed E, still subverted the plan, saving Atrahasis with wordplay worthy of a lawyer. Build a boat, but tell your people you're leaving because Enlil hates you. Technically, you're not revealing divine secrets. The echoes of these Mesopotamian floods ripple through Abrahamic traditions. Compare Ziusadra's reed ark to Noah's gopher wood vessel, or the 7-day warning in Genesis to the 7 nights of deluge in Sumerian tablets. Even the sacrificial aftermath mirrors each other. The pleasing aroma that calms Yahweh in Genesis mirrors the god's hunger for Ziusadra's offerings. But the differences are telling. In the Bible, the flood is moral purging, God's grief over human corruption. The Eridu Genesis offers something darker and perhaps more relatable. A reminder that divinity isn't always just. Sometimes it's just tired. Deep beneath the earth's crust, in a world without sunlight or seasons, the Hopi ancestors awoke to existence not on the surface, but in the womb of the first world, Tukpela. This wasn't a paradise, it was a testing ground. The people lived simply at first, but as time stretched on, some grew arrogant, hoarding resources and turning away from the sacred laws of Masor, the guardian of the earth. When corruption spread like roots through their society, the world itself became unstable. Spiders whispered warnings in their webs, and the earth trembled with displeasure. Only the wisest heeded the signs, guided by ant people through labyrinthine tunnels to the second world, escaping just as Tukpela collapsed behind them. The pattern repeated like the turning of a great wheel. In the second world, Topka, the people flourished until jealousy and warfare erupted, betraying the harmony they'd sworn to uphold. Again, the few who remembered the old ways were led to safety, this time climbing a giant reed into the third world, Kuskaza. There, the stakes grew higher. Technology advanced, cities rose, machines hummed, but so did greed. Sorcerers twisted knowledge for power, crafting weapons that could split the sky. When the balance tipped too far, floods swallowed the land, and the righteous fled once more, ascending to the fourth world, Tuwakatsi, our present Earth. But the Hopi emergence myth isn't just a history, it's a map of the future. Elders speak of 9 prophecies given to them by Masor, each a warning signpost along humanity's path. Some have already come to pass: the snake of iron railroads, the web that encircles the earth, the internet, and the gourd of ashes, nuclear weapons. The final prophecies remain unfulfilled, a great purification, a time when the earth shakes and the unworthy are left behind once more, and the righteous escape to the fifth world, guided again by the ant people. What makes this cosmology so gripping is its moral urgency. Unlike myths where destruction is inevitable, the Hopi believe the fourth world's fate hinges on human choices. The blue star Kachina, a celestial herald, will appear when the end nears, but only if we ignore the warnings. Rain patterns shifting, animals vanishing, elders' wisdom dismissed as superstition, all are echoes of past worlds' downfalls. The solution isn't passive waiting, it's active stewardship. Traditional Hopi farming practices like dry land corn cultivation aren't just techniques, they're acts of devotion, a way to mend the hoop of the world before it unravels completely. Modern environmental crises lend these ancient stories eerie resonance. When Hopi elders speak of rivers drying and trees dying from the top down, they're not reciting allegory, they're reading the land like a ledger, tallying debts we've forgotten we owe. The emergence myth doesn't offer apocalypse as punishment, but as consequence. The door to the fifth world isn't locked, it's waiting, just beyond the reach of those who still remember how to listen to the whispers in the wind. Before land or light, there was only water, an endless, silent sea stretching in every direction. Above it hung the empty sky, and between them soared a solitary bird, the great diver, searching for a place to rest its wings. Exhausted, it spotted the knee of Ilmater, the primal water spirit, rising from the depths. Landing there, the bird laid 7 eggs, 6 golden, 1 of iron, before drifting into sleep. But Ilmater stirred, her movement sending the eggs tumbling into the waves. The shells shattered against her skin, their fragments transforming into the fabric of the cosmos. The yolk became the sun, the white the moon, the scattered pieces the stars. The iron egg's darker shards formed the clouds, while flecks of gold hardened into the earth itself. From nothingness, the Kaleva's world was born, yet creation demanded more than broken shells. Vainamarainen, the eternal bard, emerged from Ilmater's womb after 7 centuries of gestation, not as a babe, but as a wise old man, his voice already resonating with the power of song. Where his fingers touched the water, fish darted into being. Where his feet scraped the shore, forests sprouted. His songs didn't just describe the world, they shaped it, bending willow roots into boats and coaxing amber from the tears of the sun. But magic this potent came at a cost. When young Joukahainen, a brash rival, challenged Vainamarainen to a singing contest, his weaker verses nearly drowned the world in floods. Only Vainamarainen's mastery restored balance, proving that words in the Kalevala weren't just art, they were cosmic forces. The tragedy lay in what followed. As time passed, the Sampo, a mystical mill forged by the smith Ilmarainen, ground out endless abundance, salt, grain, and gold, but greed corrupted its guardians. Wars erupted over its ownership, and in the chaos the Sampo shattered, its pieces lost to the sea. With it faded much of the world's ancient magic. Vainamarainen, heartbroken, built a final boat from the whispers of the wind and sailed beyond the horizon, leaving behind only his cantel, the harp of creation, as a promise that his songs might one day return. Finnish folklore captures this melancholy beautifully. The Kalevala's universe isn't static, it's a living thing that ages and diminishes, its wonders succumbing to time and human folly. The rune singers who preserved these stories knew the cost of progress. Each new forge, each axe clearing a forest, chipped away at the enchantment woven into the world's foundation. Yet the fragments remain, in the way birch trees still weep sap like Ilmater's tears, or how the northern lights shimmer like the ghost of Vainamarainen's harpstrings. The message isn't just about loss, it's a reminder that every choice, like a note in an old bard's song, reshapes the world in ways we may not live to see. At first, there was only water, a vast, unbroken sea stretching endlessly in every direction. The animals lived above the sky, crowded on a rock suspended in the void, their world too small to hold them. Desperate for more space, they sent the water beetle, Dionysi, diving into the dark depths below. For days, it searched the cold emptiness before finally surfacing with a tiny clump of mud clutched in its claws. That simple lump became the seed of the earth, expanding as if alive, spreading outward until land emerged from the waters soft and wet, waiting to be shaped. Then came the great buzzard, soaring down from the sky to inspect the new world. As his mighty wings brushed the earth, the land heaved and buckled beneath their weight. Where they dipped low, valleys formed. Where they lifted, mountains rose in jagged peaks. That's why the Cherokee homeland is filled with such rugged beauty, every ridge and hollow a stroke of the buzzard's flight. But this gift came with a warning. The mountains were fragile, their slopes prone to crumbling, a reminder that creation is never truly finished. Yet land alone couldn't sustain life. The world was dark, its creatures shivering in the cold until the clever Galquodi, the spider, saw the distant glow of fire guarded by the selfish thunder beings. Knowing the people needed warmth, she spun a web so fine it was nearly invisible, then carried a single ember back to earth in a clay pot tied to her back. Fire brought light, yes, but also danger. Flames could spread unchecked, forests could burn, and the thunder beings never stopped trying to reclaim what was stolen. This duality defines the Cherokee worldview. Every act of creation carries a risk, every gift a responsibility. The same mountains that shelter can isolate, the same fire that cooks food can raise homes. Unlike myths where destruction is punishment, here it's simply consequence, a lesson woven into the land itself. Even now, when fog clings to the Blue Ridge peaks or lightning splits the summer sky, the old stories whisper back. The earth is never static, and neither are we. It bends beneath our steps just as it did beneath the buzzard's wings, asking only that we remember the delicate balance between what we take and what we leave behind. High in the Andes, where the air thins to a crystalline sharpness, Lake Titicaca's waters hold more than just the reflection of snow-capped peaks. They cradle the birthplace of gods. From its depths in the time before time, Viracocha rose, his skin pale as moonlight, his eyes holding the fire of the unseen sun. Unlike other creator gods who shaped the world from nothingness, Viracocha emerged into a world already formed but unfinished, a canvas waiting for his touch. First, he breathed life into the sun, Intai, hurling it into the sky to banish eternal night. Then came the moon, Mama Quilla, placed as Intai's sister and counterpart, her silver glow tempering his scorching brilliance. Stars spilled from his hands like grains of sand, each one a guide for the people yet to come. But creation was only the prelude. Viracocha sculpted the first humans from stone, giving them breath and speech, villages and laws. These early beings, the Weri, were giants who walked the earth with insolent pride, forgetting their maker's commands. Displeased, Viracocha unleashed Yunu Pachacuti, the great flood, a deluge so fierce it carved valleys and shattered mountains, drowning the ungrateful world. Only two survived, hidden in sealed caves, emerging to repopulate the earth as humble, smaller beings. This wasn't mere punishment, it was cosmic recalibration. The Incas believed destruction wasn't an end, but a necessary purification, a Pachacuti, literally, world reversal. The genius of this belief lay in its application. Every Incan ruler saw himself as a potential agent of Pachacuti, tasked with maintaining balance between order and chaos. When earthquakes toppled temples or droughts withered crops, it wasn't random disaster. It was the world turning inside out, making space for renewal. Even their architecture echoed this philosophy. Machu Picchu's perfectly fitted stones weren't just engineering marvels. They were prayers in rock, designed to withstand the upheavals of a universe that might one day flip itself like a woven cloth. What's haunting is how these myths mirror Andean reality. Lake Titicaca sits atop a tectonic battleground where earthquakes and volcanic eruptions have reshaped the landscape for millennia. The Incas didn't just witness these forces, they ritualized them. During Kapak Kocha ceremonies, children were sacrificed on mountaintops not to appease wrathful gods, but to anchor the world during times of upheaval, their spirits becoming mediators between destruction and rebirth. Viracocha's flood wasn't just a story, it was a lens for understanding catastrophe as both end and beginning. The Spaniards, arriving centuries later, missed this nuance entirely. They saw Viracocha as an Andean mirror of their own white-skinned god, twisting the myth to justify conquest, but the original teachings endured in whispers. Today, when quinoa farmers speak of bad years yielding to fertile ones, or when modern Quechua singers chant of mountains that walk, they're invoking Pachacuti's timeless truth. Collapse isn't failure, it's the universe catching its breath before the next great beginning. In the scorching expanse of Mali's Bandiagara cliffs, where the desert sun bleaches the sky white, the Dogon people preserve a creation myth so precise it seems to defy time itself. Their story begins not with light or water, but with a cosmic egg, the womb of Amma, the supreme god, whose very thoughts vibrated through the void like ripples in a pond. Alone in the darkness, Amma stirred, shaping the universe from this single point. His first act, spinning the axis of the world like a potter's wheel, setting the stars in motion with a flick of his wrist. But perfection eluded him. When Amma attempted to mate with the earth, imagined as a female being, her rebellious clitoris, represented by an anthill, disrupted the union, introducing chaos into his design. This flawed creation gave birth to the jackal, a symbol of disorder, forcing Amma to try again. This time he succeeded, producing twins known as the Nommo, semi-aquatic, hermaphroditic beings who descended from the heavens in a vessel woven from starlight. More than just deities, the Nommo acted as divine architects, splitting into 4 pairs to teach humanity agriculture, metallurgy, and the sacred words that sustain the cosmos. Their arrival wasn't peaceful. Legends say their ship crashed to earth in a storm of fire and water, scarring the land and filling the Niger's bends with their lifeblood. To this day, the Dogon revere certain deep pools as portals to the Nommo's underwater realm, where they whisper secrets to initiated elders. The most astonishing detail lies in the stars. The Dogon claim the Nommo came from Sirius, the brightest star in our sky, but their oral traditions specify a companion star, Sirius, be invisible to the naked eye and only confirmed by telescopes in the 19th century. Even more baffling, they describe it as impossibly dense, a small but heavy star made of a mysterious metal called sagala, mirroring modern astronomy's understanding of white dwarfs. How a people without written language or optical instruments knew this remains one of anthropology's great enigmas. Some scholars suggest ancient contact with advanced civilizations. Others argue it's the result of meticulous observation passed down through generations of sky priests. The myth's layers unfold like the concentric circles of a baobab's trunk. At its core is the concept of Nommo Anagano, the word that moves the universe. Every Dogon ritual, from planting millet to carving sacred masks, reenacts the Nommo's original act of creation, vibrating with the same energy that spun the cosmos into being. Their granaries, shaped like Amma's egg, store not just grain but cosmic order. Even their famous Kanoga masks, danced during funerals, mirror the Nommo's gesture of touching heaven and earth simultaneously, ensuring the dead return to the ancestral star. Modern astronomers may debate the Dogon's celestial knowledge, but the myth's true power lies in its refusal to separate science from spirit. When a Dogon elder points to Sirius and speaks of the Nommo's return, he's not just recounting a story, he's affirming a living contract between humanity and the cosmos. The stars aren't distant specks, they're relatives, they're light a thread in the same web that connects every seed planted in the red earth of Bandiagara. In a world obsessed with dividing myth from fact, the Dogon remind us that some truths are too vast to fit into either category alone. The prophecy was clear from the start, a death foretold in the rasping whispers of the Norns as they carved runes into Yggdrasil's roots. Ragnarök wasn't just an ending, it was a reckoning written in the stars, a finale so inevitable even the gods couldn't cheat it. The first sign would be Fimbulwinter, 3 years of unbroken frost where brothers turned to blades over crusts of bread, and the sun hung weak as a guttering candle in the sky. Then would come the howl, Skirl devouring the sun, Hati swallowing the moon, plunging the 9 realms into a darkness thicker than pitch. The earth itself would tremble as the bound monsters strained against their chains. Fenrir the wolf, his drool forming rivers of venom, Jormungandr, the world serpent, writhing free from the seafloor, and Loki, freed from his cave of dripping poison, leading an army of the dead from Hell's iron gates. Odin, the Allfather, knew his fate. Clad in gold and shadow, he rode to the battlefield at Vigridr, his spear Gungnir in hand, his ravens screaming warnings he no longer needed. The great wolf Fenrir would open his maw wide enough to blot out the sky, and though Odin fought with the wisdom of ages, he would fall, swallowed whole, only for his son Vidar to avenge him, stomping 1 foot on Fenrir's lower jaw and tearing the beast apart with his bare hands. Nearby, Thor faced Jormungandr in a duel of mutual annihilation. His hammer Mjolnir crushed the serpent's skull, but not before its dying breath vomited enough venom to drown the thunder god in his own armor. Even Loki and Heimdall, bitter adversaries since the dawn of time, struck each other down simultaneously, their blood pooling in the cracked earth. But here's the twist that defines Norse resilience: Ragnarök wasn't the end. The fires of Surt would cleanse the world, yes, drowning it in flame until even Yggdrasil shuddered and split, but from its charred roots, a new earth would rise, fresh and green as morning. 2 humans, Lif and Lifthrasir, would emerge from the world tree's heartwood, hidden there like embers in ash to repopulate the land. The sun's daughter, brighter than her scorched parent, would take her place in the sky. And in the splendor of this reborn world, the surviving gods Vidar, Vali, Magni would gather, finding among the ruins Odin's golden chess pieces ready for another game. This myth cuts to the core of Viking ethos. Why fight if the outcome is fixed? Why sail into storms if doom waits on the horizon? Because glory isn't in victory, it's in defiance. The very word Ragnarök translates not to doom of the gods, but to fate of the powers, a subtle distinction that shifts the focus from annihilation to dignity. When the poet of the Völuspá described these events, he didn't dwell on despair. He sang of courage as a flame that outlasts even the cosmos, of honor as something no wolf's jaws can sever. Modern excavations reveal how deeply this belief ran. Warriors buried with their swords weren't just equipped for an afterlife. They were armed for the battles of Ragnarök, ready to stand with Odin in the final charge. Even today, when Scandinavian winters stretch too long or storms batter their coasts, there's an unshakable pragmatism in the face of hardship, a cultural muscle memory that whispers, "Burn the old world if you must." Whatever rises from the ashes will be worth the fight. The great dissolution, Pralaya, doesn't unfold with fire or flood, it begins with a sigh. As the cosmic cycle ends, Vishnu exhales, and the universe collapses inward like a wave receding into the ocean. Stars blink out not with explosions, but as embers swallowed by the dark. Mountains dissolve like sugar in water, and time itself unravels until nothing remains but the infinite sleeping form of Vishnu, floating on the serpent Ananta in the void. This isn't mere destruction, it's the universe returning to its source like a drop merging with the sea. Unlike the Norse Ragnarök or the Christian apocalypse, Pralaya isn't punishment, it's renewal on the grandest scale. Yet this total dissolution is just one layer of Hindu cosmology. Between these epoch-ending pralayas come smaller resets, like the great flood that swept the earth in the time of Manu, the progenitor of humanity. Here, Vishnu didn't withdraw the cosmos, he intervened. Taking the form of Matsya, a golden fish, he warned Manu of the coming deluge, instructing him to build a massive ark. But this wasn't just about survival. Matsya towed Manu's vessel through the raging waters, carrying not just humans but the Vedas themselves, the sacred blueprints of creation ensuring knowledge wouldn't perish. When the flood receded, life didn't just continue. It rebooted, purified by the waters but still rooted in the old order. The contrast between these destructions reveals Hinduism's intricate sense of cosmic rhythm. The Matsya flood is a localized reset, like pruning a single tree in an endless forest. Pralaya, though, is the forest itself returning to seed. The flood preserves, the dissolution transforms. Even the gods aren't exempt during Pralaya. Brahma, Shiva, and Vishnu themselves are reabsorbed, their roles meaningless until the next cycle begins. Yet there's comfort in this vast scale. If the universe can end and begin anew without losing its essence, perhaps our personal struggles are part of a grander, more resilient design. Modern science echoes these ancient intuitions. The heat-death of the universe, where entropy reaches maximum and all energy disperses, mirrors Pralaya's stillness. Periodic mass extinctions recall the flood's selective renewal. The genius of Hindu cosmology lies in its flexibility. Destruction isn't a one-size-fits-all catastrophe but a spectrum of endings, each serving a purpose. Whether through Vishnu's sigh or a fish's flickering tail, the message is the same: every closing is an opening in disguise. The Titanomachy wasn't just a war, it was the crucible that forged the cosmos. For 10 brutal years, the Olympians clashed with the Titans, their battlefields stretching from the peaks of Mount Othrys to the pits of Tartarus. Lightning split the sky as Zeus hurled his thunderbolts, while the earth trembled beneath the feet of 100-handed hecatoncheires, their countless arms crushing entire mountain ranges. The Titans, led by Cronus, fought with the desperation of rulers who knew their reign was slipping, but the Olympians fought with the hunger of usurpers who had nothing to lose. When the dust settled, the Titans lay imprisoned in Tartarus, their bodies chained beneath the weight of the very earth they once ruled. Yet this victory wasn't the end of strife. It was the beginning of a pattern that would haunt Zeus forever. Take Prometheus, the Titan who sided with Zeus only to betray him in secret. He didn't just defy the king of the gods by gifting fire to humanity. He revealed the flaw in Zeus's new order. Fire wasn't merely warmth or tool-making, it was knowledge, ambition, the spark of rebellion itself. For this, Zeus ordered Prometheus bound to a rock where an eagle would feast on his liver daily, only for it to regrow each night. The torment wasn't just punishment, it was a warning. Even the cleverest challenger would break under eternal pain. But Prometheus knew something Zeus refused to admit: no rule lasts forever. Hidden in the Titan's silence was a prophecy that shook Olympus to its core. One day, Zeus would fall to his own son, just as he had overthrown Cronus. This cyclical nature of power is the heartbeat of Greek mythology. Zeus's victory over the Titans mirrored Cronus's defeat of Uranus, and the prophecy of his downfall hung like a sword over his throne. His paranoia became his weakness. When Metis, the goddess of wisdom, was pregnant, Zeus swallowed her whole, fearing her child would surpass him, only for Athena to burst from his skull years later, fully armored and unyielding. Even his attempt to control fate backfired, proving that suppression breeds rebellion. The Greeks understood power as a fleeting thing, a flame passed from hand to hand. Their myths didn't glorify stability, they exposed its illusion. Every generation of gods, like every generation of mortals, believed their order would endure until the next uprising proved them wrong. The Titanomachy wasn't just a battle between old and new, it was the first act in an endless drama where chaos and order dance in lockstep, neither ever claiming the final victory. Every night, as Ra's golden solar bark dips below the horizon, the real battle begins. The underworld's black waters churn with the presence of Apophis, a serpent so vast his coils could strangle the world, his venom potent enough to dissolve the sun itself. This isn't just a monster, he's the living embodiment of Isfet, the primordial chaos that existed before creation and threatens to unravel it still. yet Ra doesn't face him alone. Standing at the prow of the bark, spear in hand, is Set, the god of storms, whose brute strength and trickery keep Apophis at bay. Behind him, the serpent's roars shake the cavern walls as Isis whispers spells so potent they bind the serpent's fangs mid-strike. It's a fight that never ends because Apophis can never truly die. To destroy him would upset the balance. Chaos is as necessary as order, the shadow that gives the light its shape. The Egyptians didn't just tell this story, they lived it. At the temple of Karnak, priests performed the breaking of the red pots ritual at dusk, smashing clay vessels painted with Apophis's name to symbolically shatter his power. The shards stamped with the serpent's image were then ground into dust underfoot, a magical reenactment of Ra's nightly victory. Even the pharaoh played his part. In reliefs at Abydos, he's depicted harpooning a hippopotamus, a stand-in for Apophis, proving his role as Maat's earthly defender. These weren't empty gestures. They were cosmic maintenance, acts of spiritual upkeep as vital as repairing a crumbling temple wall. What's fascinating is how these rituals acknowledged chaos without surrendering to it. The Book of Overthrowing Apophis, a collection of spells from the New Kingdom, doesn't seek to annihilate the serpent, just restrain him long enough for the sun to rise again. Priests would draw the serpent in green ink on papyrus, then burn it, spit on it, or stab it with iron knives, a metal believed to repel chaos. But the next night, the ritual repeated because Apophis, like entropy, could never be fully conquered. This duality shaped Egyptian ethics, a scribe's orderly columns of hieroglyphs, the precise alignment of pyramids to the stars, even the strict hierarchies of society, all were bulwarks against Isfat's tide. Yet they also knew too much order stagnates. The Nile's annual floods, though destructive, brought fertile silt. The desert, though deadly, shielded them from invaders. Apophis wasn't just an enemy, he was the friction that kept the universe moving. Modern minds might dismiss these battles as mere myth, but their insight endures. We still personify chaos, whether as pandemics, climate disasters, or political upheavals, and still perform our own rituals to ward it off, from fire drills to financial hedging. The Egyptians simply had the courage to name their monster and row toward it every night, knowing the sun wouldn't rise without the fight. The Mayans didn't count down to doomsday, they tracked the turning of a cosmic wheel. Unlike Western calendars that march in a straight line toward an unknown future, the Mayan long count was a spiral where every 5,125 years the world didn't end, it renewed. The notorious 2012 phenomenon, with its Hollywood-fueled panic about apocalyptic prophecies, was a mistranslation of something far more profound. When the 13th Bayaktan, a cycle roughly 400 years long, rolled over on December 21, 2012, it wasn't a finish line. It was a reset button, a chance for the universe to catch its breath and begin again. Dig deeper into the Dresden Codex, one of the few surviving Mayan books, and you'll find no prophecies of fire or flood. Instead, intricate tables chart Venus's movements alongside rituals for maize planting and royal coronations. Time wasn't abstract for the Maya, it was a living force woven into the fabric of daily life. Their calendars synchronized solar years with sacred cycles of 260 days, creating a latticework of dates so precise it could predict eclipses centuries in advance. This wasn't just math, it was a map of creation's rhythm where past and future mirrored each other like reflections in a cenote's still waters. The Maya didn't fear collapse because their myths had already explained it. Take the Popol Vuh's tales of previous worlds, each one destroyed when its people forgot their duties to the gods. The first humans were made of mud and crumbled, the next of wood, burned for their arrogance. Only the third attempt, humans crafted from maize dough, held the wisdom to sustain the world. This wasn't fantasy, it was a framework for understanding real historical upheavals. When classic Maya cities like Tikal and Palenque were abandoned in the 9th century, scribes didn't record it as tragedy. Inscriptions speak of pictons, epochal shifts where rulers willingly entered the water, surrendering power so the next cycle could dawn. Temples weren't ransacked, they were ceremonially retired, their doorways sealed with care, as if putting them to sleep until their time came again. Even the so-called Mayan apocalypse had precedent. In 664, the city of Karakol fell not to invasion but to a calculated retreat. Stelae show its last king, Kayan Roman II, not fleeing in defeat but standing calmly as the calendar's great cycle closed. His departure wasn't surrender, it was synchronicity, an acknowledgement that some endings are necessary for the next beginning. Modern archaeologists confirm this pattern. Mayan collapses align eerily with droughts, yes, but also with calendar milestones, as if the people themselves chose to step back when the cosmos demanded it. What Western interpreters called collapse, the Maya saw as metamorphosis. Their pyramids still stand, not as ruins but as dormant seeds. In Guatemala, elders still light copal incense on old temple steps, whispering to the gods that one day, when the count turns over again, the stones will remember their purpose. The 2012 frenzy missed the point entirely. The Maya weren't predicting doom, they were offering a radical alternative to our linear dread. Time isn't an arrow, it's a heartbeat. And every pulse, no matter how faint, carries the promise of another dawn. For the Aztecs, the sun didn't rise each morning out of habit. It was an act of divine bargaining paid for in blood. At the heart of their cosmos stood Tanatia, the fifth sun, his face etched into the great calendar stone, not as a benevolent life-giver, but as a starving deity demanding tribute. The glyphs surrounding him told the story plainly. 4 previous suns had already perished: jaguars, wind, fire, rain, and flood, each collapse triggered by the god's dissatisfaction. This fifth sun, born from the self-immolation of Nanahuatzin at Teotihuacan, was different. It moved, but motion came at a cost. Without the sacred energy of Chalchihuatl, the precious liquid of life, human blood Tanatia would halt mid-sky, plunging the world into endless night. The scale of sacrifice still staggers modern imagination. At the Templo Mayor's summit, priests wielded obsidian blades sharp enough to split a hair, slicing open chests to offer still beating hearts to the sun. Victims, often warriors captured in ritual flower wars, were painted in blue chalk, their bodies transformed into living vessels of the god Tezcatlipoca. Far from random slaughter, this was cosmic recycling. The Aztecs saw blood not as waste but as fuel, the same way maize needs rain. Spanish chroniclers recorded tens of thousands sacrificed annually, though modern scholars debate the numbers. What's undeniable is the precision. Ceremonies aligned with solstices, equinoxes, and the planet Venus's cycles, each death a calibrated act to maintain celestial mechanics. But this practice wasn't just about fear, it was rooted in a profound reciprocity. The gods had sacrificed themselves to create this era. Quetzalcoatl spilled his own blood to animate human bones. Nanahuatzin leaped into fire to become the sun. How could humans do less? In the Florentine Codex, elders described sacrifice as nextlahualtin, debt payments. To withhold blood was to risk cosmic bankruptcy, inviting earthquakes, droughts, and the Tzitzimime star demons who descend to devour what remained. Even children weren't exempt. During droughts, offerings of young ones' tears were believed to coax the rain god Tlaloc from his mountain caves. The moral complexity emerges when you consider the victims' fates. Contrary to colonial depictions of helpless captives, many were revered as god impersonators, living for months in luxury, feasted, adorned, and honored before their final ascent to the temple. The Ixiptla, or god image, wasn't just killed, they were transfigured, their deaths a sacred metamorphosis. A warrior's heart fed the sun, but his spirit joined Tanatea's celestial army, battling darkness each dawn. Yet the system wasn't infallible. When Cortés arrived in 1519, some Aztec factions saw omens, comets, strange births, as signs the fifth sun cycle was already failing. The Spaniards' arrival coincided with the new fire ceremony, a 52-year ritual meant to restart the cosmic clock. Did Moctezuma hesitate because he feared the gods had abandoned the bargain? Modern scholars suggest the Aztec elite may have doubted their own theology when foreign ships appeared, as if the universe had introduced a variable their myths couldn't explain. What lingers isn't just the horror of sacrifice, but its haunting logic. In a world where the sun's survival depended on human action, every blade of grass symbolized a choice. The Aztecs didn't revel in death, they shouldered what they saw as a terrible, necessary duty. Theirs was a universe that demanded participation, where the line between cruelty and devotion blurred like twilight on a blood-stained altar. The fifth sun still hangs above us, its light a question. What would we sacrifice to keep the world alive? Before the first emperors ruled, before the written word etched histories into bamboo slips, there was only water, a deluge so vast it drowned the mountains and swallowed the sky. This was no ordinary flood, but a cosmic imbalance, the heavens themselves cracked and leaking, their blue dome collapsing in jagged fragments. Into this chaos stepped Nuwa, the serpent-tailed goddess, her hands stained with the mud of creation. She didn't stop the waters, she went straight to the source, melting stones of 5 colors: azure, crimson, gold, jade, and obsidian. She patched the ruptured sky like a potter mending a broken bowl. Then she severed the legs of a giant turtle, propping up the 4 corners of the heavens where they sagged. But here's the twist, her repairs weren't perfect. The sky tilted ever so slightly to the northwest, explaining why rivers in China flow east while the sun and moon drift the opposite way. Even divine fixes leave traces. Yet floods kept coming. Centuries later, another catastrophe struck, this time not from the sky, but the earth's unrestrained rivers. Yu the Great, a mortal engineer with the patience of bedrock, faced a mess not of divine making but human neglect. His predecessor, Gun, had tried to dam the waters with walls of stolen heavenly soil, only for the floods to burst through with greater fury. Yu chose a different path. For 13 years, he mapped the land's sinuous, digging channels to guide the torrents, carving 9 great rivers to the sea, his hands calloused from the shovel, his legs permanently hairless from wading in mud. Where Nuwa worked from above, Yu labored from below. Her flood was celestial accident, his was bureaucratic failure. The genius of these myths lies in their contrasting solutions. Nuwa's intervention was immediate, mystical, a top-down rescue. Yu's was systemic, grindingly practical, a lesson in governance disguised as hydrology. The Chinese imperial court would later enshrine his methods in the Yu Gong tribute of Yu. A geographic treat is so precise it listed the soil types of every province. Emperors weren't just rulers, they were custodians of waterworks, knowing that neglected dikes meant more than wet crops. They were cracks in the mandate of heaven itself. Because in Chinese cosmology, disasters were never just disasters, they were report cards for kings. When the Yellow River burst its banks or droughts cracked the earth, it wasn't bad luck, it was a sign the ruler had lost virtue. The Zhou dynasty formalized this as the mandate of heaven, a divine contract where floods, earthquakes, and famines were heaven's way of revoking tenure. The Xia dynasty's collapse blamed on their last tyrant's decadence, which made the waters poison. The Shang's downfall linked to their drunken orgies angering the river spirits. Even rebellions were framed as natural disasters, peasant uprisings described as human floods sweeping away rotten regimes. This wasn't superstition, it was political genius. By tying rulership to environmental stewardship, the mandate of heaven created a feedback loop. Emperors built granaries not just to feed the hungry, but to prove their virtue to the cosmos. They repaired canals not only for trade, but as public displays of cosmic harmony. When the Tang dynasty's Empress Wu Zetian faced a locust plague, she didn't just order pest control, she issued an edict confessing her failures, hoping to appease heaven's wrath. The system had a built-in reset button. disasters justified revolution, allowing new dynasties to rise with the moral high ground of restoring balance. Modern scholars still debate how much climate shaped China's history. The collapse of the Ming dynasty in the 17th century coincided with the Little Ice Age crop failures, floods, and famine weakening the state just as Manchu invaders struck. But the myths had already predicted it. Yu the Great's canals and Nuwa's tilted sky were more than stories. They were warnings written in water and stone. A ruler's legitimacy wasn't just won on battlefields or in palaces, but in the mud of rice paddies and the flow of rivers. When the levees held, so did the throne. When they broke, the mandate washed away with the flood. The floodwaters that drowned the world in Mesopotamian myth didn't stay confined to cuneiform tablets. They seeped into the bedrock of Abrahamic tradition, reshaping the story of divine wrath and renewal. But Noah's Ark, the most famous deluge narrative, carries echoes of something far older. The Babylonian epic of Gilgamesh, etched 1,000 years before Genesis, already told of Utnapishtim, a man warned by the god E to build a vessel and preserve life before the gods unleashed their watery judgment. The parallels are uncanny down to the birds sent to scout for dry land. Yet the Abrahamic version sharpens the moral stakes. Where the Eridu Genesis framed the flood as divine annoyance over noise, Genesis recasts it as punishment for humanity's corruption, with Noah's righteousness offering a glimmer of hope in the darkness. The flood isn't just resetting creation, it's testing it, but the waters recede and the story doesn't end. The Rainbow Covenant, God's promise never to destroy the world by flood again, hints at something unresolved. If water was off the table, what next? Enter the book of Revelation, where the apocalyptic imagination shifts from drowning to fire. Armageddon's battles, 7 seals, and the 4 horsemen weave a tapestry of destruction far more elaborate than a simple deluge. Yet the core theme remains purification through catastrophe. The Lamb opens the scroll, the martyrs rise, and Satan is bound for 1,000 years, not forever. Like the Norse Ragnarök or the Hindu Pralaya, this isn't pure annihilation. It's a refining fire, burning away the old to make room for the new Jerusalem descending from heaven, its streets paved with gold. What's fascinating isn't just the shared structure of these stories: judgment, destruction, rebirth, but why they resonate across cultures. Psychologists suggest apocalyptic narratives thrive because they externalize our deepest anxieties. Climate change, pandemics, nuclear war, modern fears wear new names, but the pattern feels ancient. The flood myth persists because it offers agency. Behave rightly, build the ark, and you survive. Revelation's horrors come with a cheat sheet: the faithful endure. Even secular doomsdays like asteroid impacts or AI rebellions follow the same emotional blueprint: chaos, then a chance to start over. Yet the Abrahamic twist lies in its moral weight. Where the Maya saw cycles and the Norse embraced inevitable doom, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam insist on accountability. The flood isn't arbitrary, it's a response. Armageddon isn't fate, it's consequence. This shift transforms destruction from a cosmic given to a divine negotiation, a warning that endings can be averted if humanity changes course. The rainbow and the New Jerusalem aren't just symbols, they're invitations. The apocalypse in this light isn't something to fear but to outgrow. Perhaps that's why these stories endure. They're not just about the world's end, they're about its meaning. Whether carved on Mesopotamian clay or inked on medieval parchment, they whisper the same question. When the waters rise or the stars fall, will we be the ones who built the ark or the ones who ignored the storm? Across every culture and continent, humanity's oldest stories whisper the same truth: destruction isn't the end, but the raw material for rebirth. Whether it's the Norse gods emerging from Ymir's corpse, the phoenix rising from its own ashes in Egyptian lore, or the Hindu cosmos dissolving into Vishnu's breath only to be born anew, these myths aren't just about catastrophe. They're about transformation. Natural disasters, floods, fires, earthquakes aren't merely tragic events in these narratives. They become the chisel that shapes civilizations, the forge where gods and humans alike are tested. The Aztecs feared their fifth sun would crumble without sacrifice, while the Hopi saw past worlds collapse under the weight of human pride, each collapse clearing space for something wiser. Even in the biblical tale of Noah, the flood isn't just punishment, it's a washing clean, a chance to rebuild from the wreckage. What's striking isn't just the similarity of these stories, but the urgent questions they force us to confront. Are they cautionary tales warning us against greed, arrogance, or neglect of the sacred? Or are they comforts assuring us that even in the face of unimaginable loss, life finds a way to begin again? Perhaps they're both. The Maya tracked the cycles of collapse and renewal with mathematical precision, seeing time as a wheel rather than a line. The Greeks believed every golden age carried the seeds of its own undoing, just as every downfall held the promise of a new Olympus. These myths don't just explain the past, they mirror our present anxieties about climate change, pandemics, and war, offering a strangely hopeful lens. Destruction isn't failure. It's the universe's oldest tool for starting over. So what do you think? When you hear these ancient stories of fire and flood, do they sound like prophecies, parables, or something deeper, a primal reminder that endings and beginnings are forever tangled? And which myth resonates with you the most? Is it Sedna's stormy vengeance, the Dreamtime's eternal songlines, or the stubborn spark of Prometheus's stolen fire? Drop your favorites in the comments, because these tales were never meant to be locked away in books. They're alive, evolving with every retelling, just like the worlds they describe. After all, the next chapter hasn't been written yet. What will it say? And there you have it, 30 legendary myths of creation and destruction, each one a window into how our ancestors grappled with the biggest questions of all. Where do we come from? How will it all end? And what happens next? These stories aren't just relics of the past, they're mirrors reflecting humanity's deepest fears, wildest hopes, and unshakable resilience. Whether it's the Norse gods battling at Ragnarök or Sedna stirring the Arctic seas, these myths remind us that destruction isn't just an ending, it's the seed of something new. If you enjoyed this journey through cosmic battles and world-shaping floods, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. There are so many more mysteries to explore, like the upcoming deep dive into legendary lost civilizations from Atlantis to Lemuria, where we'll uncover the truths hidden beneath layers of myth and history. Your support helps keep these stories alive, so drop a comment below telling us which myth resonated with you the most. Was it the fiery sacrifice of the Aztec fifth sun, or maybe the Dreamtime's eternal songlines? Let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, keep wondering, keep exploring, and remember, every ending is just someone else's beginning.